4 bodies in a valley, 4 horses still tied to the scrub brush, standing patient, standing still, as if they had not yet understood what happened in the night New Mexico desert. Autumn, 1878. Dry, old, and good at keeping secrets no one dared ask about. A small town chose silence before the sun came up. The sheriff lowered his eyes. The preacher closed the church doors. 2 ranch hands who found the dead simply turned and walked away without a word. On the wall of the general store, a yellowed wanted poster still hung there. A name, a face, a charge nobody in this territory dared speak aloud anymore. Some wounds do not close with time. Some men hide in the desert for 5 long years, only to set the hammer down one hot afternoon and hear footsteps coming down the ridge. 4 bodies were found in that valley on a fall morning in 1878. 2 ranch hands came across them just after the sun cleared the eastern ridge. 4 men, 4 horses, still tied to the scrub brush nearby. The horses stood patient and still, not understanding what had happened. Nobody in the town of Carver's Bend went out to look at them. Not the sheriff, not the preacher, not the men who found them first. The whole town chose silence and held it like something precious. They had practiced that silence long enough to do it without thinking. This is the story of the man those bodies belonged to. And everything that had to happen before that morning came. The man's name was Matias Crowley. He was 37 years old and he lived alone on a broken mesa. His land sat 6 miles west of Carver's Bend, past the dry creek. He had arrived 5 years earlier with a horse and a rifle. He brought nothing else and had asked for nothing else since. He built what he needed and refused everything he didn't. The New Mexico sun came down hard on that mesa in summer. It turned the air thick and difficult to breathe by midday. Dust settled on everything out there without preference or exception. Fence posts, boot leather. The brim of a hat left in the sun. The only sound on most days was a hammer striking cedar. 1 blow at a time, slow and steady and regular as breathing. Like a heartbeat that had chosen not to quit despite every reason Matias worked alone. Shirt open at the collar, sleeves rolled past the elbows, sweat soaked through the back of his shirt by mid-morning each day. Each swing of the hammer drove another cedar post into the hard earth. When one post was set, he moved on to the next without pausing. No break, no ceremony, just the work. Always just the work. His hands told the story of 5 years of living this way. Calloused palms, scarred knuckles, rope burns healed white across his wrists. These were not the hands of a man who had found peace out here. They were the hands of a man trying to outwork his own past. Day after day, under the same relentless sky, he had been a scout once, and a good one. Men trusted him to read the land like a written page. He could find water in country where others found only dry ground. He could track a man across bare rock and leave no sign of his own. His ears could pick out careful footsteps from wind at half a mile. Officers had valued those skills. Soldiers had followed where he pointed. He had been good at his work, and he had known it. Then came Redcliffe Canyon and everything that followed it. He did not think about Redcliffe Canyon if he could manage it. His whole life out here was built around not thinking about it. The fence needed posting. The roof needed work every spring. The garden by the dry creek needed water carried by hand. There was always something requiring his attention, and he made certain of that. As long as his body stayed tired enough, the memories held their place. Most of the time, he had not spoken to another living person in nearly 2 weeks. He was driving posts along the eastern fence line alone in the heat. The sun was high and mean, the shadows short, and the air still. He reached for his canteen, lifted it halfway to his mouth, and then he stopped. A figure stood on the ridge above him. Still as a fence post, completely motionless, just standing there in the full glare of the afternoon sun, watching him work. Matias had lived alone long enough to know what that meant. Travelers move, watchers hold still. This one had been holding still for a very long time. He set the canteen down without making a sound. His hand moved to the revolver at his hip. Fingers found the worn grip and settled there. He slowed his breathing down and watched. The figure began to descend, not fast. Not like any kind of threat coming. More like someone fighting gravity one careful step at a time. Each foot placed as though the ground beneath might not hold. Whatever was keeping that person upright, it was nearly spent. Matias watched. His hand stayed on the gun, but he did not draw it. The figure reached flat ground and he could see her clearly. Not a soldier, not a rider from any outfit he recognized. A woman, young, Apache, and in serious, immediate trouble. Her dress was torn along the side seam and neckline. The fabric was stiff with dried sweat and red desert dust. Bruises covered her ribs and shoulders in dark and overlapping patches. Her long black hair, woven with feathers and leather strips, clung to her face. Rope burns around both wrists shone raw and wet in the afternoon light. She moved the way people move when they have no other choice. Step after careful step across the last 50 yards toward him, Matias stood at the fence and read everything he could see. Distance, body weight, the angle of her breathing, the set of her jaw. She stopped 8 feet from the fence. Both hands came out and gripped the top rail. Not to climb it, just to hold herself upright. Her knuckles went pale against the cedar. She raised her face and found his eyes directly, dark eyes. Steady, burning with something that pain had not managed to put out. She looked at him for a long and level moment. Then she spoke. "Do you remember me, Cowboy?" The question landed somewhere low and quiet inside him. Not in his chest, somewhere deeper than that. He studied her face carefully. He tried to read past the exhaustion. He looked at the line of her jaw, the angle of her chin, the specific way she held herself upright even now, even like this. Then he saw something on her left temple, a small scar, pale against her brown skin, old and specific in its shape, the shape left by jagged burning timber pressed against the face of a child. Matias had seen that scar before. He had been running when it happened. Smoke filling both eyes, fire on 3 sides, and closing. A child's hands locked around his neck tight enough to leave marks through his coat. He had run until he cleared the fire line and put the child down in the grass. He had turned back toward the flames and known there was no time left. That had been Redcliffe Canyon, 5 years ago. A different world. His voice came out, rough and low. "I've seen you before," he said. "A long time ago." Near the cliffs, her shoulders dropped. Just slightly, just enough to see it happen. Something she had been carrying since before she started walking was allowed to rest. "I'm the girl you saved that night," she said. "My name is Kimala. People call me Kimmy." He didn't answer right away. He was still looking at the scar. "I came because I didn't know where else to go," she said. "I remembered which direction you rode when you left. The shape of these hills. I thought maybe you were still out here. Maybe you'd remember. I walked a long way on that, maybe," she said. "I remember," he said quietly. Her knees started to give then, not gradually, all at once, the way bodies give out when reserves are gone. Her grip on the fence rail was the only thing between her and the ground. She held on, breathing hard, eyes still on him. Matias came through the gate. He did not try to carry her. He stood beside her and let her find her own footing. When she was steady enough, he walked with her toward the cabin door. She made it on her own, slowly, one hand trailing the fence rail the whole way, but she made it herself. That mattered to him, though he couldn't have said exactly why. Inside, he sat her on the edge of the cot. He poured water into a tin cup and held it out. "Drink slow," he said. She obeyed. While she drank, he crouched beside the cot and looked at her injuries. He had done this kind of work before, field medicine. No ceremony involved. The rope burns were the most serious, deep, raw, and very recent. The bruising on her ribs was older, already yellowing at the outer edges. She had been taking damage for days before she ran. The cut on her thigh had scabbed cleanly. That was the good news. "How long were you walking?" he asked. 3 days, she said. "Mostly at night, through the canyon country?" "Yes." "I stayed in the creek beds during the day when it was hottest." "Smart," he said. "Hard to track someone in loose sand in the heat." "My father taught me that," she said. He looked at her wrists again. He thought about 3 days of canyon country in that condition. He thought about what kind of person comes through all of that alone. He pushed what came after that thought down where it could not tighten his hands. "Who had you?" he asked. Her jaw tightened. She was deciding how much to say. Then she made her decision and met his eyes without flinching. "A man named Dalton Voss," she said. Something cold moved through Matias's chest, deep and sudden, the way ice water hits the lungs. He kept his face still. His hands did not stop moving. But that name landed with the weight of things long unresolved. He had heard that name before. In a different place, under different circumstances. From a man in clean boots, with a professional and easy manner. From a man who had handed him a map, too precise to be honest. He had heard it before Redcliffe Canyon burned. He said nothing for the moment. "After the fighting scattered my people, some of the men blamed me," she said. "They said I brought bad luck, that I should have died in the fire." She paused. They sold me to Voss. He planned to take me north, to use me as property in the mining camps up there. "How did you get free?" he asked. "I cut the rope on a sharp rock 3 nights ago, then I ran." Were you followed? I don't know. I moved as fast as I could. He stood and went to the window. He scanned the ridge, the creek bed, the open ground in all directions. The land looked empty. Still, pale under the late afternoon sun. But he knew better than to trust how land looked. He had trusted how land looked before. Rest, he said. I'll keep watch. She lay back without argument. Within minutes, her breathing deepened and her eyes closed. Whatever had kept her upright across 3 days of canyon country was spent. Matias sat against the wall with the rifle across his knees. He watched the window. He listened to the desert, doing what it does at night, and he thought about the name she had said. Dawn came cold and gray. Kimmy had called out twice in her sleep. Both times Matias had moved closer and watched until she settled back down. When she finally woke, pale light filled the narrow cabin window. She turned and found him sitting exactly where he had been all night. You stayed up the whole night, she said. Old habit, he said. She pushed herself upright slowly, testing what the rest had done for her. The bruising looked darker in the morning light, but her breathing came easier and the trembling in her hands was gone. The water and rest had started their quiet work. She looked around the cabin with careful attention. A spare table, an organized shelf, weapons within arm's reach of every position. Everything placed for function, nothing placed for comfort, no pictures on the walls, no personal objects of any kind, and no mirror. Not anywhere in the room at all. She noticed that last thing and said nothing about it. After she drank the water he poured, she reached inside her dress. She drew out a folded piece of paper worn soft from long handling. The folds were nearly worn through. The paper had turned the color of old cream. She held it in both hands without opening it. Her fingers pressed flat against it the way hands hold things carried too long. "What is that?" he asked. "Something my father signed before he died," she said. "Something important. I'll tell you more when I trust you more." "Fair enough," he said. She tucked it back inside her dress without unfolding it. He noted how naturally her hand closed over it when she did. Automatic, like breathing, older than thought. Whatever was written on that paper, she had chosen it over her own safety. She had hidden it through 6 weeks of captivity. She had carried it across 3 days of open desert on wounded legs. He did not press her on it. He poured fresh water into her cup and handed it across. There was smoke on the north ridge at first light, he said. 2 miles out, maybe less now than yesterday. Kimmy looked at the window. Her face went carefully still. "He doesn't stop," she said. "Men who hunt don't stop, because the trail gets long," Matias said. "Not when they believe what they're after is still out there." He moved to the wooden crate under the table. Ammunition. A second revolver. Dried meat wrapped in cloth. He began loading weapons with the quiet efficiency of long practice. Kimmy watched him for a moment. "You know his name," she said. Her voice was level. His hands did not stop. "Mifoi." "I've heard it before," he said. She asked. He set the revolver down. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked up at her. "He gave me the map," Matias said. "The night of Redcliffe Canyon. He told me what was in that valley. He's the one who sent me in. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of things being understood for the first time." Kimmy looked at him with those dark, steady eyes. She was putting pieces together that had been separate her whole life. "He gave you the wrong information on purpose," she said slowly. "That is what I believe," he said. She breathed out, long and quiet. "The man who destroyed my family is the same man hunting me now. It appears that way," he said. She sat with that for a long moment without speaking. Then she opened the paper and smoothed it flat on the table between them. She turned it so it faced him. "Then you need to understand what this says," she told him. It was a trade agreement, handwritten in English on one side, Apache script on the other. The English laid out the terms in careful and precise legal language. A freight route through Redcliffe Canyon, exclusive rights, 20 years of them. Access rights, toll collection, maintenance obligations, all standard commercial terms, granted to one Marcus Webb and his affiliated trading company. At the bottom, 2 signatures, Marcus Webb in English and her father's name in Apache. Meisha's read it once. Then read it again more slowly. "Webb was going to run freight through the canyon," he said. "Exclusively," she said. "For 20 years, no competing operation without Webb's permission. No other merchant on that route." She looked at him. Dalton Voss had spent years building his freight network. The canyon was his fastest route north for everything he moved. Without it, his costs were higher and his competitors could keep pace. My father's agreement with Webb made Voss's route worthless overnight. She looked at the paper between them. 2 weeks after my father signed this agreement, Voss came to you with his map. Matias said nothing for a long moment. 23 people. A settlement burned to its foundations. 5 years of a man carrying it alone on a mesa no one asked about. And underneath all of it, not gold, not war, not any noble cause. A freight route. A commercial advantage. Worth a calculated number of human lives to a man who ran the numbers and chose. Webb disappeared 1 month after the raid, Kimmy continued. No body. No explanation. Gone without a trace, Voss dealt with him after the army business settled. This paper is the only copy that survived, she said. My father kept it separate from everything else. Hidden with family belongings. I found it when I went back after the fighting. And you've kept it through everything since, Matias said. Through everything, she said. Yes. He looked at the paper on the table between them. He thought about what she had protected and what that protection had cost her. He knows you have something, he said. He suspects it, she said. He doesn't know exactly what, but he's thorough. He won't leave the uncertainty alone, she met his eyes. That's why he sent so many men after one woman. Matias stood and went to the window and looked north. The smoke on the ridge had thinned down to nearly nothing. A fire that goes cold no longer needs to announce itself. A camp that stops showing smoke is a camp that has moved closer. He's not waiting anymore, Matias said. He's coming. Kimmy stood. The paper was back inside her dress. The pistol was in her hand. Then we need to be ready, she said. He sent her to rest again by early afternoon. He spent the remaining daylight checking the perimeter in long, careful arcs, boot prints, disturbed ground, any sign of approach in any direction. Nothing close, nothing recent. The land held its silence without offering anything. He climbed the eastern ridge at late afternoon for a final look. To the west, the mesa country rolled in long, slow waves. To the east, the dry creek wound through scrub and pale stone. To the south, open ground ran flat to a far tree line. He turned north, nothing. The smoke was gone entirely. That was the thing that concerned him most. He was coming back down the ridge when the instinct struck him cold. Not a sound he could identify. Not a movement he could point to. Just the particular absolute certainty of a trained man's instincts in the dark. Something was on this ridge. Close. Already aware of him, he stopped moving completely. He stood still and let his other senses do what his eyes had missed. He listened. He felt the wind direction. He noted where the shadows deepened. Then he heard it. A faint displacement of gravel 6 feet to his right and slightly uphill. The sound of a boot heel placed with great care, but not quite enough care. He spun and had the revolver level in the same motion. A young man stood behind a large boulder with both hands raised. Apache. Mid-20s. A makeshift bandage on his shoulders soaked through with old blood. His clothes were torn and dust-caked from hard travel in rough country. His face showed pain, not aggression, not threat. The look of someone for whom one more gun pointed at them changes very little. Don't shoot, he said. His English was accented and clear. I am not your enemy. Give me one reason to believe that, Matias said. Because I know who you are, the young man said. I know who you have in the cabin down there. And if I had wanted you both dead, I had 2 full days to arrange it. Matias kept the revolver level. Who are you? My name is Takakota, the young man said, from deeper in the shadow behind the boulder. An older voice came, rougher at the edges, patient in the way of someone used to waiting. And I am his cousin. My rifle has been on you for the past 4 minutes. Perhaps we can all stop pointing things at each other now. A man in his mid-40s stepped out from behind a cluster of scrub pine. He lowered his rifle slowly, as a deliberate gesture of good faith. A knife scar crossed his throat, old and deep. He had the particular stillness of a man who had spent long years in hard country. Dalton Voss's camp. Matias said to Takakota, You've been part of it for 6 weeks, he said. The weight of what he was confessing was plain. He captured me. He said he would hurt my sister if I refused. I tracked for him. I scouted for him. I had no other choice left. He pulled aside his shirt to show the burns and bruises along his ribs. Systematic damage, the kind left by sustained and deliberate punishment. This is what he does to people who do not cooperate well enough, he said. Matias looked at the wounds. Then at Takakota's face, he was reading the exhaustion and the guilt and the decision that had finally been made. The look of a man who had been doing something terrible and had reached his limit. He lowered the revolver slowly. Then we go inside, he said, and you tell me everything. From the cabin below, a lantern came on, and its small light crossed the yard. Kimmy was already awake, already waiting, already watching. Matias rode east before the sun had been up an hour. Kimmy's wound needed medicine. The infection had begun moving along the cut. Left another day, it would become something much harder to manage. He needed supplies from town, and he did not want to go to town. He had not wanted to go to that town for 5 years, and for good reason. "I'll be back before midday," he said at the door. Kimmy sat on the cot with the spare pistol across her knee. The fever from the wound had put a faint shine on her face, but her eyes were clear and her grip on the gun was correct. "How far?" she asked. 6 miles east," he said. "Place called Carver's Bend." Something careful moved across her face at the name. Not surprise, something more like recognition and alertness. "Voss does business there," she said. "Most people in this territory do business there at some point," he said. "It's the nearest supply point for 40 miles. Be careful," she said, not as a courtesy, as a specific warning. "I'll be quick," he said, and went out. He rode at an easy pace, keeping to lower ground where he could. He had ridden this same route a dozen times over the years for supplies. He had always moved quietly and watched the terrain from habit. He had never had reason to believe the terrain was watching him back. That morning, he was not so certain about that anymore. Carver's Bend sat in a shallow valley at the junction of 2 freight roads. Not a big town by any measure of the word. A main street with maybe a dozen buildings of varying quality, a livery stable, a general store, a small bank with freshly whitewashed walls, a church at the far end with a peaked roof, and an empty bell tower. The bell tower had never held a bell in its life. Matias tied his horse at the rail outside the general store and went in. He listed what he needed without ceremony or conversation. Antiseptic, clean bandaging cloth, carbolic acid, if any was on the shelf. The proprietor filled the order without looking up more than twice. He kept his eyes down in the way of a man being deliberately careful. Matias paid. He turned toward the door and stopped. He had not meant to look at the wall beside the door. It was pure reflex. He read every room he entered out of old habit, exits, occupants, anything that didn't fit with everything else. The wall held notices, auction announcements, missing livestock, land sales, and one document that was older than all the rest. It had gone the color of old cream, the edges curled and darkened, but the ink was still legible. A hand-drawn likeness above a few lines of text. Matias Crowley. Wanted for dereliction of duty and complicity in deaths of civilians. Redcliffe Canyon, New Mexico Territory. Armed and dangerous. Report to nearest Army authority or civil office. He stood there for 3 seconds exactly. Then he walked out at a normal pace, untied his horse, and mounted. He rode to the far end of the block and sat. He had known in some abstract way that a notice like this might exist. He had never let himself think about it directly. Thinking about it would have required thinking about Redcliffe Canyon at depth. He had spent 5 years refusing to do that thinking. But seeing his name on that wall in this specific town was something else entirely. Not abstract. Specific. Present. Attached to the territory where Dalton Voss lived and operated. He thought about the word they had chosen. Complicity. Not misled by false intelligence. Not orders followed in good faith. Complicity. Someone had chosen that word deliberately and with intention. He was still thinking about it when a hand touched his bridle lightly. He had the revolver out before the thought completed. An old man in a blacksmith's apron stood in the shadow of the farrier's awning, past 65 with a face like a dried riverbed and big weathered hands. He looked at the revolver with the calm of a man not afraid of guns. "I know who you are," the old man said very quietly. "And no, you didn't do what that paper says you did." Matias kept the gun level. "Who are you?" "Eli Cross. I run the smithy." 30 years now, he nodded toward the store. "That paper went up 4 years after Redcliffe," he said. "After things had settled enough for certain people to write their own version." "What certain people?" Matias said. The old man glanced up the street. "The man whose name is on the bank and on the church door," he said. "He has connections in the territorial office." Getting a notice posted was easy for him. He met Matias's eyes directly. "I was here the night Voss came back from Redcliffe. I heard him in the saloon, talking about land transfers and the canyon being open now. And I said nothing. A pause. I've carried that for a long time." He released the bridle. "Get out of this town before Deputy Harker sees you. Harker keeps that notice active." "Voss pays him too." He turned and walked back into the shadow of the smithy without looking back. Matias sat on his horse for a moment in the quiet of the morning street. Then he turned west and rode out of Carver's Bend at a steady pace, not hurrying, not dawdling. The way a man rides when he does not want to be remembered. Behind him, somewhere on the main street, a door opened and closed. He did not look back. He was back at the cabin before midday with the medicine. Kimmy was on her feet when he came through the door, pistol in hand, back to the wall, angle on both door and window. She had used the time to think about where to stand. She relaxed when she saw him and lowered the gun without being asked. He told her everything plainly and without softening any of it. The notice on the wall, the specific wording they had chosen. Eli Cross in the shadow of the smithy with his quiet and his 30 years of knowing. The deputy who kept the notice active on Voss's salary. She listened without interrupting. Once, he's been building this for years, she said when he finished. Not just the canyon. Everything around it. The town, the law. The official record, he's a thorough man, Matias said. Careful men leave things unfinished because they're afraid, she said. Thorough men finish everything. There's a difference. That evening, with the darkness settled in around the cabin, Takakota was brought inside. He sat against the wall with his shoulder freshly bandaged. Ahiga stood near the door and watched the window and said nothing. Kimmy looked at Takakota the way people look at someone they once knew differently. I remember you, she said quietly. You used to race my brother to the top of the Red Rock. Every summer, Takakota said. He always won. He did not always win, she said. He told me he did. He lied to you, Takakota said. I let him win. He was insufferable when he lost. Kimmy looked at him for a moment. He would have liked you for saying that. The cabin was quiet after that for a few seconds. Then Matias put a tin cup and 2 flat stones on the table between them. He used them to mark positions, a rough map of the homestead and its approaches. We don't defend from inside, he said. That's what he expects. We hit them first. Before they're ready and before they know we know, Takakota goes back tonight. He tells Voss the cabin is empty. He says, I rode south at dusk to check the southern fence line. He says the woman is alone and the timing is right. Voss will push the approach immediately on that information. He'll rush. Rushing men make noise. Noise I can work with. He moved the markers on the table. I take the west, behind the boulder cluster above the creek bank. Ahiga takes the north from the depression beyond the garden wall. Kimmy, you take the south approach. The shallow ravine below the fence line, 30 yards between each of us, triangulated on the expected approach direction. When Takakota leads them east into the open ground, we close the triangle. Nobody fires until I fire. 1 shot from the west is the signal. Ahiga spoke from the doorway. What if they split before Takakota brings them in? We adapt, Matias said. But Voss won't commit until the position is confirmed. He needs to see the approach before he sends his men. That's the window. Takakota looked at Matias steadily. When I don't come back to camp tonight, he'll know something is wrong, he said. Matias met his eyes. Yes, he said. He will. That's the risk you carry by going back in. I know what the risk is, Takakota said. His voice was quiet and completely resolved. I've known for a while now what the risk was going to be. Some costs you pay and don't regret, he said. This is one of them. Nobody argued with that. Kimmy put her hand on Takakota's arm for a moment. She did not say anything. She did not need to. The gesture said what it was meant to say without requiring words. Matias looked at the rough map on the table. He thought about terrain and angles and the mathematics of 4 on one side against 3 on the other. Then he thought about Takakota walking back into that camp tonight alone. We won't let you down, he said. Takakota nodded once. I know, he said. That's why I came to you. Before the plan was executed, Kimmy asked for the full account, not the version he had given her in summary the day before. The complete account. Every detail he still carried. She asked the way someone asks when they have been owed the answer for years. He sat at the table across from her in the low candlelight. He clasped his hands together. He looked at the table for a moment, then he looked up and held her eyes and began. He had received the assignment 3 days before the raid. A staging camp in the canyon country, according to the briefing officer. Armed men. Stolen weapons. Intelligence gathered over several patient weeks of fieldwork. The briefing officer had been thorough and confident, and everything matched what he knew. The map Voss handed him was the most detailed material he had ever received. Voss had come to him personally the night before the operation, not through any chain of command. Directly, in person, after the camp was quiet. A civilian advisor was how he'd been described to the unit. He had clean boots and a good coat and the manner of a man who belonged everywhere. He had walked up to Matias at the perimeter, where Matias was running his standard checks. They had gone over the map together by lantern light. Voss had confirmed landmarks, explained features, and answered every question raised. Every detail matched what Matias had observed in his own prior scouting. The camp location, the terrain approach, the sight lines. Everything consistent. Then Matias had mentioned the thing sitting at the back of his mind. I had seen small tracks near the eastern creek bed that morning, he said. Children's tracks? I raised it with they? Kimmy asked. He said it was a standard deception technique, Matias said. Women and children moved up front to mask armed men positioned behind. He said he had seen it used in operations further north of this territory. He said the specific intelligence on the camp was solid and confirmed. He said the tracks were a deliberate diversion. Not to be concerned. Matias looked at his hands on the table. He said it so easily, he said, like it was the most natural explanation possible. And you believed him, Kimmy said, not as an accusation. Just as a statement of fact. I was tired, he said. 3 weeks on that operation without a real break. The map was so detailed. The man was so certain. I told myself that I felt was just nerves before a mission. I let the doubt pass, he said. And then you went in, she said. And then we went in, he said. Yes, he looked at a point somewhere beyond the table while he continued. We moved into the canyon at 2 a.m, he said. No moon. I was well ahead of the main column as point scout. When I reached the location marked on the map, I stopped. I could see the cooking fires. Low ones, nearly burned out. I could see the structures around them, and something was wrong. The shelters were the wrong size. Too small. Too close together. Not a staging camp. Not a warrior encampment at all. He stopped, and you could hear the children, Kimmy said quietly. Yes, he said. I could hear the children. I turned back immediately to signal the column to halt, he said. But the officer had pushed the approach faster than the planned timeline. By the time I reached them, there was nothing left to stop. The lieutenant said the intelligence was confirmed and the operation was proceeding. That was the end of the conversation between us. He stopped again. The lantern threw orange light on the walls. Outside, the desert was completely still. The first shots came from the west flank, he said. Someone in the camp heard us coming. Someone fired first in panic. The moment that shot went, everything was already beyond stopping. I went in from the north side, where the fire hadn't reached yet. I found 3 people I could get clear of it, and then I heard something underneath a section of burning wall, small sounds. A child still alive underneath the burning wood. He looked at her left temple. I went in and pulled the section apart with my hands, he said. There was a little girl underneath it, holding herself as small as she could get. She grabbed onto me the moment I reached her. She held on so hard I felt her fingers through the coat. He stopped. He breathed. The candle was very low now. I ran, he said. I ran until the heat was behind me. I put her down in the grass beyond the fire line and turned back. There were others, he said. I could not reach them. The cabin was quiet for a long moment. A coyote called once from somewhere east and went still. I reported the colonel at first light, he said. Standard debrief. I gave my account. The officer wrote his report, and then I walked out of the command tent in the morning, and I heard Voss's voice in the tent beside it. What did he say? Kimmy asked, very quietly. Matias was still for a moment, he said. Have the land transfer documents sent to my office by Monday. He looked at his hands. That was all I needed to hear. I stopped walking outside that tent, and I understood everything. In one moment, I stood there for 3 seconds. I thought about going back inside. He shook his head. Then I kept walking. Why? She asked. I was afraid, he said. I had seen what that man could arrange when he chose. I told myself I had no proof. That it was my word against his, but that was not the real reason. He held her eyes. I was afraid of a man in a clean coat, and I chose to be quiet. When quiet was the wrong choice to make, he said. He stopped. That is what I carry, he said. Not the raid itself, the morning after. The choice I made at that tent. Kimmy looked at him for a long time. Then she said, my father told me something before he died that night. He said the man who led the soldiers was not our real enemy. He said our enemy was the man who told the leader where to go. She kept her eyes on him. He knew it wasn't an accident, she said. He just didn't have the name. She placed her hand flat on the table between them. Not on his hand, near it. A presence without demand. You were afraid of a powerful man, she said. That is a human failing. Dalton Voss made no failing. He planned every step of it. He used your honesty and your exhaustion and your decency as instruments. The guilt you carry for what he did, he designed that guilt precisely. He needed you to carry it so you would never look up and ask questions. Matias looked at her hand near his on the table. That doesn't let me off the hook, he said. No, she said. But it means the hook belongs to a different ledger. The one that matters now is tonight. And what we do from here? He nodded slowly. Then let's talk about that, he said. After the plan was set, Ahiga went outside alone. He stood at the north corner of the cabin and looked toward the ridge. He had been quiet through most of the evening. This was not unusual for him. Ahiga was a man who used silence the way others use speech, deliberately. With full awareness of what the silence was communicating, Matias went outside after a while, checking the horses in the perimeter. He came around to the north side and found Ahiga standing there in the cold, not inside where it was warmer. Outside, looking north into the dark country. You don't have to stay in this, Matias said plainly. Not a dismissal. An honest accounting of what was still available to him. Ahiga did not turn around. He kept his eyes on the dark ridgeline. Takakota is my sister's son, he said. I have watched him for his whole life, from the beginning of it. I watched him learn to ride and make bad choices and love the wrong people. I watched him become someone worth knowing. When Voss took him, I followed. He paused. Not because I believed I could stop it, because I could not simply continue without following. Masha said nothing. I have lost a great deal in my life, Ahiga continued. A wife. 2 children before they were grown. My brother. A home that is not what it was and will not be again. He turned then and looked at Matias directly. His eyes had the quality of deep water. Calm on the surface, not from absence of depth, but because of what the depth contains. I am too old and too tired for causes, he said. But I am still capable of doing things for specific people in front of me. Takakota is one of mine. The young woman inside is one of mine. He paused. And you? He looked at Matias for a moment. You are someone trying to do the right thing a little too late. I can respect that. I have been in that position more than once myself. He said nothing more. He turned back to the window. Matias stood in the cold night air, alone for a moment. The stars were fully out the way desert stars come out when the air is dry. The Milky Way ran horizon to horizon as a solid band of cold, white light. He looked at it for a moment and thought about what Ahiga had said, about trying to do the right thing a little too late. He thought about whether that was enough, whether it changed anything real, whether 5 years of self-imposed exile had been penance, or just hiding with a better name. He did not have a clean answer to that. He thought that might be acceptable for now. Some questions answer themselves over time if you remain alive to wait for them. He went back inside. Kimmy sat on the cot, with the Winchester across her knees. She was not sleeping. She was thinking. He sat down at the table across from her. The candle between them was burning low, and the shadows were large and quiet. Are you afraid? He asked. She considered the question before answering. A little, she said. But the afraid part is quiet right now. I've been afraid for a long time, she said. Afraid when they sold me. Afraid every night in his camp. Afraid every night I was running. She looked at the rifle in her hands. There's a different feeling when you stop running and turn around. Fear is still there, she said. But it gets smaller when you face it directly. Matias looked at the candle flame. I was afraid the morning after Redcliffe Canyon, he said. The kind that makes you walk past things you should have stopped at. The kind that dresses itself up as reason. She looked at him. She understood exactly what he meant. My father used to say something about fear, she said. He said the worst wounds are not the ones our enemies give us. They are the ones we give ourselves out of our own fear. He said it after burying 2 of his sons in the ground. I think he had earned the right to say it, she said. They sat with that for a while. The candle burned lower. The desert held its silence outside the thin walls of the cabin. What do you picture when you think about tomorrow? He asked. The morning after, she said without hesitating. The sun coming up, the smoke gone from the ridge. Something worth building in a place that could hold it. She looked at him. What do you picture? He was quiet for a moment. The same thing, he said. For the first time in 5 years, Takakota left for the enemy camp an hour before the moon went down. He moved carefully, favoring the wounded shoulder. At the door, he stopped and looked back one last time. He looked at the room, the candle, the 3 faces turned toward him. When this works, he said. Kimmy had already corrected him when he said if. Find something worth building. We need people who build things back. We have had enough taken away. He looked at Kimmy. Tell Kala I was brave. You are brave, she said. Right now. In this moment, he nodded. He went out into the dark without another word. The door closed behind him. The candle settled, Matias checked the rifle one more time. Kimmy pulled her dark hair back and tied it close. She layered the extra shirt over her dress and checked the pistol. She was ready before either of the men. An hour later, the moon went behind the western ridge. The change was immediate and total. The pale light that had been silvering the desert floor went out. What was left was the deep, star-lit dark of the high desert. Enough to navigate by if you knew this specific country. Not enough to be confident about anything more than 40 feet ahead. Tia stood at the cabin door and looked at his two remaining companions. A higa, steady, a strip of dark cloth wrapped around the rifle barrel to cut any glare. Kimmy Riddy, eyes on him, nothing in them asking for reassurance of any kind. He opened the door. They went out into the dark without speaking. They separated at the doorway immediately. 3 directions, 3 positions, like a hand opening wide before it closes. Kimmy went south into the shallow ravine below the fence line. Moving low and steady, she reached the scrub brush in under a minute. She settled in and went still. From 30 yards away, she was invisible. He watched her vanish and turned west. He moved parallel to the north fence, keeping the cabin between himself and the approach. He reached the cluster of large boulders he had marked in his mind that afternoon. Good cover, good sight lines to the east where Takakota would bring them. He got behind the largest boulder and went flat and held completely still. A higa moved north into the rougher ground beyond the garden wall. A natural depression in the earth offered a prone position nearly invisible from 3 directions. He was in position in under 4 minutes. The desert was quiet around all 3 of them. Insects in the dry grass, the intermittent wind, the far sound of the creek, the sounds that belonged here every night without exception. Matias slowed his breathing. He counted his heartbeats deliberately. He waited 20 minutes, then 30. Then he heard it, very faint and from the east. A horse placing a hoof on loose stone. Just once, then silence. Then from further north, the sound of a different horse. They were coming in on horseback, spread wide, using the dark properly. His hand settled around the rifle without any conscious instruction. Takakota's voice carried across the still air toward the approaching riders. This way, he said. The woman is alone. He left at dusk. Dalton Voss's voice came back. Even. Unhurried. Professional. How long ago? Before dark. I watched until the lamp came on. She's alone inside. A pause. The sound of horses settling. The creak of saddle leather shifting. Then Voss said, in exactly the same even and unhurried tone, Takakota, yes. You're nervous. I'm not. More nervous than usual. I know what usual looks like on you. The sound of a pistol being drawn and cocked was distinct and clear in the still air. You did something, Voss said. Tell me what you did. Matias's finger moved to the trigger. Nothing. I did exactly what you asked. The cabin is. The shot came before Matias had consciously decided anything. Voss's gun. A sharp crack and then a cry of pain from Takakota. Then Matias fired. The shot rolled out across the valley like something breaking open. From the south, Kimmy's rifle answered within 2 seconds. From the north, a higa's shot followed less than a second after that. The night erupted all at once, horses screaming. Men shooting and scrambling for cover in the dark, return fire going in the wrong directions, all of it confused and blind. Nobody being shot at from 3 sides simultaneously knows which way is safe. Matias was already moving. He rolled left off the boulder before the echo of his first shot had crossed the valley. He came up behind a lower formation and read the muzzle flashes, placing each man by where his gun had fired and how long ago. 2 of them had gone to ground behind the dry creek bank east of the... One flashed further north, trying to get an angle on a higa's position, and Dalton Voss was nowhere. No muzzle flash from the man himself, no sound of him firing. No position he could be read from. In the opening exchange, the man who had started everything had gone completely silent. Matias scanned the dark country left to right, looking for movement, looking for the specific stillness that is not peaceful. The stillness of something deciding its next move. From the south, Kimmy fired again. A sound followed. Heavy, conclusive. A man going down and not getting up. A higa fired twice in quick succession from the north. From the creek bank, one of the 2 sheltered men stopped returning fire. The other shifted west, trying to break out of the triangulated field, and met the arc of a higa's next shot halfway through the attempt. From the east, Takakota's rifle fired once, and then went silent. Matias moved east, low and fast, using every fold of the terrain. He needed to find Takakota, and he needed to find Voss. Both needs urgent. Both pulling in different directions. He found Takakota beside a flat rock on the eastern ground. One hand pressed to his lower side, the other reaching for the rifle that had fallen away. The pistol shot from the opening had taken him in the leg, but something else has caught him in the side in the exchange. His breathing was wrong. Too shallow. Too quick, I'm here, Matias said, coming down beside him. He knew, Takakota said. His voice was still controlled. Before I said anything, I know, Matias said. You bought us what we needed. That's what counted. 2 of them went to the cabin from the west, Takakota said. Before the shooting started, Voss had a second plan running parallel, Kimmy, he said. Matias looked west. 200 yards out, the brief flare of a torch being lit, then a second torch. Both moving towards the south side of the cabin. Go, Takakota said. He had the rifle now. I can keep the creek bank men occupied from here. You're shot, Matias said. I know I'm shot, Takakota said. Go! Matias looked at him for 1 second. He came around the south side of the cabin at a dead run. One torch carrier was 10 feet from the wall and closing. Kimmy's position in the ravine was directly behind the man. She could not fire without the angle putting the shot into the cabin wall. The man had not seen her. Down, Matias called. Kimmy dropped flat. His shot took the torch carrier in the shoulder and spun him hard sideways. The torch hit the dry grass and lit it. The second man had turned at the sound and was raising his rifle. Kimmy came up from the ravine and covered the ground between them in 4 seconds. She drove the rifle butt into his jaw with everything she had. He went down like a gate falling and did not get up. Matias stamped out the burning grass. From the north, Ahiga fired twice more, then silence. From the east, Takakota's rifle fired once, and there was no more return fire from anywhere in the dark. The silence came down over the valley. Matias stood in it and breathed. He scanned every direction. He counted the men he could account for. He came up one short, no flash, no movement, no sound from any direction. Dalton Voss had not fired a single shot during the entire engagement. He looked at Kimmy. She was already doing the same count, coming to the same number. One short. He was still out there, somewhere in the dark country surrounding them, watching. Still 3 moves ahead, patient as he had always been. Then, from the east, Takakota's voice came thin across the dark. It's clear over here, he said. A pause. Then, smaller. Come over here. Something in the way he said it made both of them move at once. They found him against the flat rock where Matias had left him. He was on the ground, one hand pressed against his lower side. Ahiga was already there, sitting quietly with one hand on Takakota's arm, not saying anything, not needing to. Kimmy went to her knees in the dirt beside him. She took his hand and held it in both of hers. His eyes opened when she touched him. He looked at her, then at Matias, then past them at the eastern horizon. The sky there had begun the slow shift from black to the deep blue that comes before dawn, still an hour away. But coming, did we win? He asked. Yes, Kimmy said. We won. He nodded slowly, each breath now a separate and deliberate decision. My sister, Kala. Tell her I was brave. You were, Kimmy said. She kept her voice steady for him, the way you keep things steady for someone's final minutes. You were the bravest person here tonight by a long distance. Takakota looked at the eastern sky. The first pale thread of gold appeared at the very edge of the horizon. Something remembering it was supposed to arrive on schedule. There it is, he said quietly. There's the morning. He watched it for a little while longer, and then he didn't. Ahiga sat with him for a long time after. He did not move, and he did not speak. He kept his hand on Takakota's arm and looked east at the arriving light. Whatever he was thinking, he kept inside himself. Some griefs are kept not because they cannot be shown, but because showing would make them smaller, Kimmy sang. She sat back on her heels and sang in her father's language. A low song, unhurried, and asking nothing of whoever heard it. Matias did not understand the words. He had heard something with that feeling in it once before in his life, at Redcliffe Canyon, in the early morning hours after. From a direction he had not been able to locate. He understood now where it had come from and what it had been for. He stood back and let the song do what it was built to do, but Dalton Voss was still out there in the dark, and the song would have to finish first. Matias looked at Kimmy. She met his eyes. She knew she would not leave Takakota, but she knew. He turned and moved west into the open ground. Matias worked outward from the cabin in a slow reading arc, checking the shadow behind each boulder, the angles behind the scrub brush, the gaps between rock formations, the places where a patient and experienced man would choose to stand and wait. He thought about the map Voss had drawn for Redcliffe Canyon, the precision of it, the detail that should not have existed without a specific purpose. A man who could draw a map like that had spent real time in real country. He knew terrain. He knew how to use it. He had been using it his whole working life. Then Matias stopped between two tall rocks in a gap he had initially overlooked. A shape. Still, not moving, facing east. Facing the direction of everything Voss had come here tonight to finish. Matias straightened. "Voss," he said. The man turned without any hurry, as though the moment had been arranged and he had only been waiting for it to arrive. Dalton Voss looked exactly like what he was, a man in his early 50s who had spent his life making decisions that others paid for. Broad through the shoulders, a face that showed nothing it did not choose to show. The face of a businessman. A man whose name appeared on churches and water troughs. The pistol in his right hand was held at his side, pointing at the ground. His breathing was even. His posture was easy. His eyes were calculating. "Scout," he said. "The way you address someone you have thought about for a long time." "Lay the gun down," Matias said. Voss did not lay it down. He looked at Matias with the measuring attention of a man who runs numbers. "You stayed in this territory for 5 years after Redcliffe," he said. "Most men with a guilty conscience run further than 6 miles. I didn't run," Matias said. "I stayed because running felt like the wrong kind of wrong." Voss found that worth considering. "I sent men to watch this area last spring," he said. "They reported a single homesteader, solitary, no apparent threat. I thought about dealing with it then. But I wasn't certain it was you. I don't move on uncertainty," he said. "That's a principle I hold to." "Then the woman ran," Matias said. "And she ran this direction," Voss said. "Yes." "Very convenient." He looked at Matias calmly. "You've been a loose end for 5 years, Crowley. A quiet one. A fence-building hermit is not dangerous," he said. "But loose ends have a way of tightening unexpectedly, like now." "Put the gun down," Matias said again. Voss did not. "I chose you specifically for Redcliffe," he said. "Did you know that?" Matias kept the rifle level and said nothing. "There were 3 other scouts available that season," Voss continued. "Better rates on 2 of them. One of them was a faster rider, but I chose you." He paused. "Do you know why?" Matias waited. "Because you were known as the most honest scout in this territory," Voss said. "Men said you followed information exactly as given. No editorializing. No self-interest. Completely reliable," he said. "A man like that is the perfect instrument. Because when something goes wrong, everyone looks at the instrument, not at the hand that held it. The words landed the way certain truths land when they have been waiting to arrive. Not like a blow. Like something heavy being set down permanently in place. In a space that had been holding that weight without knowing what it was, you needed someone honest," Matias said. "I needed someone whose honesty would become their conviction," Voss said. "I needed you to believe that you had made the mistake. To carry it. Because a man carrying that kind of guilt doesn't look up and ask questions. He looks down," Voss said. "It served its purpose very well for 5 years." He raised the pistol. "It's over," Matias said. "It's never over until one of us is finished," Voss said. And he fired. They fired at nearly the same moment. Voss's shot caught Matias across the left shoulder and spun him hard sideways. The rifle came out of his hands when he hit the ground. He went down to one knee and came back up immediately. The revolver was out. Left arm not working properly. Right hand solid. Voss had moved the moment his own gun fired. He stepped left behind the rocks, and then the rifle shot went through empty space. Now he came around the side fast, pistol leveled, closing the distance hard. He squeezed the trigger at 4 feet. The pistol clicked. Empty. He looked at it for a fraction of a second. Then he dropped it and drew the long knife from his belt and kept coming. He drove into Matias' shoulder first before the revolver could come fully level. They went down hard together onto the cold desert ground. The revolver came loose in the fall. Voss got on top and his hands found Matias's throat and locked there. The grip was strong and practiced and belonged to a man who had done this before. Matias's vision began going dark at the edges of his sight. He got his left hand under Voss's forearm and pushed, but the shoulder was wrong and the arm had nothing in it. He got his right hand against Voss's chin and pushed hard. It slowed things. It did not stop them. "You should have stayed in your hole," Voss said above him. "You were not a problem until you chose to make yourself one." The darkness was spreading inward now. "You couldn't protect them at Redcliffe," Voss said. "You can't protect her now." Matias's fingers found something in the dirt beside his head. A stone, not large, but he closed his hand around it. He brought it up and drove it against the side of Voss's head. Not hard enough to end it. Hard enough to loosen the grip by 1 degree. Matias pulled his head sideways and dragged air back into his lungs, the burning, desperate sensation of a man who came very close to not breathing again. He twisted and got his knee between them and shoved. Voss came off him, and they rose to their feet together unsteady, 3 feet apart, both breathing hard, the knife still in Voss's hand, then a single shot, clean, from 30 feet away. Voss turned sideways and grabbed his right shoulder with his left hand. The knife dropped. He turned and looked in the direction of the shot with genuine surprise. The first real expression Matias had seen on his face all night. The surprise of a man long accustomed to being the one with the plan. Kimmy stood 30 feet away with the pistol level in both hands. Her face was streaked with dust and dried tears, and her hair had come loose. She stood in the pale gray of the first light before dawn. She looked at Dalton Voss without any expression that had a simple name. Voss looked at her, then at Matias, then back at her. The girlie said, something almost like acknowledgement in his voice. Of course, Matias picked up his revolver from the dirt. Voss was still standing, still looking at Matias with those calculating eyes. Even now he seemed to be working through whatever possibilities remained. There are others, he said, associates. Men in the territorial office. This doesn't end with me, maybe not, Matias said. His voice was rough from the throat. But you won't see what comes next. Voss looked at him for a moment longer. Then at Kimmy. Then at some point on the ground between them. I built something real, he said quietly, almost to himself. The town, the routes, the whole network of it. It was real, he said. 23 people, Matias said. Voss looked up. 23 people, Matias said again. That is what it cost. He fired once. The sound of it crossed the valley and rose and faded into the enormous silence of the desert. Then there was nothing left of it. Dalton Voss was on the ground, and it was over. Matias stood in the sudden quiet and breathed. He breathed for a long moment, not thinking about anything specific, just breathing. The shoulder hurt, the throat hurt. The body had its full inventory of damage. None of it was important enough to pay attention to right at this moment. Kimmy came to stand beside him. She lowered the pistol, she looked at Voss on the ground, then she looked at Matias. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. There was nothing yet that language was the right instrument for. The desert held its quiet around them both. The first birds of early morning had begun somewhere to the south, small sounds, far away, indifferent to everything that had happened here. The sky to the east was changing, black moving to deep blue starting to carry a thin thread of gold at its very edge. Dawn was coming, the way it always came, whether anyone had made it through the night or not. Kimmy said, Takakota, one word, and they ran. They came across the flat ground toward the creek at a full run. Ahiga was where he had been, sitting at the flat rock looking east. His hand still on Takakota's arm, his eyes on the arriving light. They came to him and stopped. Matias crouched beside Takakota. He looked at the young man's face. Takakota was very still. His eyes were open, facing east, looking at the light that was arriving exactly as he had asked it to, but he was no longer there behind them. Kimmy sat down in the dirt beside him without a sound. She took his hand and held it and looked east the same direction he had last looked. Ahiga did not move from where he was. He kept his hand on the arm and kept his eyes on the horizon. Matias put his hand on Takakota's shoulder. He looked at the young man's face for a long moment. He thought about what it costs to do the right thing too late. He thought about what it costs to do it exactly when it needs doing. He thought about the distance between those two things. Thank you, he said quietly. Just to the air, just to the morning, just to what remains when a person is gone, but what they did is not. The sun cleared the ridge, red and full and very old and very beautiful in the way the desert chooses to be, without warning. Without asking permission, the way things are sometimes beautiful in the middle of terrible mornings. They buried Takakota facing east, as he had asked, with the full morning light coming across his face. The desert opening out ahead of him in every direction. Wide and cold and very old, Ahiga gathered stones from the ground around them without being asked. He worked slowly and with care and with the knowledge his hands carried. He said nothing while he worked. Each stone was placed in the manner of his people. Each one a deliberate and quiet decision made without ceremony or performance, Kimmy sang. A low song in her father's language, unhurried, making no demand of whoever heard it. Matias stood back and listened. He did not understand the words. He had heard something carrying that same feeling once before in his life. At Redcliffe Canyon. in the first gray hours of the morning after. From a direction he could not locate at the time. He understood now where it had come from. He understood what it had been for. When the song finished, Matias stepped to the head of the cairn Ahiga had built. He put his hand flat on the top stone, just for a moment. Just to acknowledge something honestly, without words and without ceremony and without performing anything for anyone's benefit. Just the weight of one hand on stones and what that weight meant. He took his hand back. He looked east at the full morning sun above the ridge. Then he turned and walked back toward the cabin. Kimmy fell into step beside him. They walked in silence for a while, the morning coming fully on around them. The light going from gold to white, the temperature beginning its slow daily climb, the desert looking the same as it had looked every day before this one. Vast and unhurried and holding its own counsel about everything it witnesses. "Do you still hear it?" she asked after a while. He looked at her. "Redcliffe Canyon," she said. "When you close your eyes," he took a moment before answering. He gave her the honest answer. "Yes," he said. "I still hear it." Does this sound the same as before?" she asked. He thought about the last several days, about all of it from the beginning. "Not exactly," he said. "How is it different?" she asked. He was quiet for a few steps. Before, he said, it was the only sound. Everything else was quiet around it. Now there are other sounds in the way. She walked beside him without pressing him for more than that. He gave it anyway. "Your voice," he said. "What Takakota said last night. The sound of the hammer every morning at first light." He paused. "It doesn't make the fire quieter," he said, "but it's not the only thing anymore." She looked at the cabin ahead of them. The walls standing, the door open the way they had left it. The garden by the dry creek needing water, waiting on her return. The same as it had been before any of this began. And entirely different. Is that enough? She asked. He looked at the fence line he had been building for 5 years. Not to keep anything out, not to hold anything in. Just to give his hands work while the rest of him survived itself. He thought about what comes after that. What might be built in a place like this for a reason other than staying alive? "Today it is," he said. She looked at him. He looked at her. And something in those 4 words held more than 4 words usually carry. A month after the night in the valley, things shifted in Carver's Bend. Nobody knew exactly how the word traveled. Small towns receive information through channels nobody can fully trace. A word passed in a feed store between 2 men who knew each other. A question asked and a hesitation where there had been no hesitation before, and the hesitation traveling faster than the answer itself. What the town knew was this: Dalton Voss was gone. His men were gone. His camp was cold and empty. The horses had been found wandering by a rancher east of the creek. No sign of Voss in any direction or in any report from any territory. People had questions. People always have questions when something powerful disappears. But the questions in Carver's Bend were asked quietly and pointed away quickly. Nobody wanted to be standing in the open when the settling was finished. Deputy Harker left without telling anyone he was going. His office was simply empty one morning and remained so for 3 weeks. The wanted notice on the wall of the general store came down. Nobody asked who had taken it, and nobody volunteered the information. Ellie Cross the blacksmith was still there. He had been there 30 years, and he would be there 30 more. One afternoon, a rider came through from the west and stopped at his smithy. The rider said little. He paid for a shoe and a small repair. Before he left, Eli said quietly, "Tell the man west that the notice is gone." The rider nodded. He rode west. He delivered the message. Matias received it without changing his expression. He set down the hammer he was holding. He looked at the fence line running straight and solid toward the western horizon. "All right," he said, and picked the hammer back up. Kimmy was standing behind him on the unfinished porch. She had heard everything. She watched him go back to the fence. She watched him drive the next post with the same steady rhythm as always, the same rhythm that had filled these days for 5 years before this one. But different now. She knew it was different. The sound of something being built toward rather than built away from. In the fall, a letter arrived from the territorial capital. It acknowledged the death of Dalton Voss under circumstances still under investigation. It noted that certain land transfers from the years following Redcliffe Canyon were under review. It did not mention Matias Crowley by name. It did not need to. Kimmy read it twice. She folded it neatly and placed it on the table. She put the trade agreement her father had signed beside it. She looked at both documents side by side for a long moment. Then she placed her father's document inside the letter and sealed them together. "For the record," she said. "In case anyone ever looks, someone will look," Matias said. "Eventually, I know," she said. "That's why it needs to be there when they do." She did not ask what would be decided or by whom or when. She had spent enough of her life waiting for systems to decide what the truth was. She had placed the truth where it could be found by whoever was ready to find it. That was what she could do. That was what she did. In the spring, Ahiga said he was going south. He said it the way he said most things, simply and without preamble. One morning over coffee on the unfinished porch, watching the early sun come up, "I'm going south," he said. "I've been meaning to. Kala is south," Kimmy said. "Yes," he said. He was packed and ready by mid-morning. A man who travels light stays that way by habit. He said goodbye to Kimmy with the kind of goodbye that is more than a goodbye. The kind that says, "You are mine, and I will not lose track of where you are." She held his hand in both of hers for a moment. She nodded. He nodded back. The exchange was complete. Matias walked with him to the tied horse in the morning light. They stood there for a moment in the quiet before the heat. "You're welcome back here," Matias said. "I know," Ahiga said. "That's why I can go." He mounted and looked down at Matias for a moment. "The fence is good work," he said. "It'll hold through winter." "It's held through 5 already," Matias said. 6 is different," Ahiga said. 6 is a choice." He turned his horse south and rode. The desert took him in the way the desert takes everything it knows. Quietly, without comment. As though it had been expecting him all along, Matias stood and watched until the distance had him completely. Then he went back to the fence. The second room of the cabin was finished by early summer. Solid walls, a good roof, a window that faced east and caught the morning. Kimmy had planted the garden along the creek, and this year it came in green. She carried water by hand every other morning. Same motion Matias had used for 5 years. Same motion. Different reason entirely. He watched her do it one morning and sat with that distinction. Same motion. Different reason. It might have been the most important distinction he had come across in 5 years. That evening he asked her, "Do you want to stay here?" She looked at him. "I am staying here," she said. "That's different from wanting to," he said. She looked at him for a moment. "No," she said. "It's not. Not for me," she said. "Not anymore." He looked at the cabin, the fence, the garden. The second room built new. He looked at her standing in the evening light in the middle of all of it. "All right," he said. She smiled at him. "Not large, just real." He smiled back. Also not large, also real. Both of them choosing it. Both of them meaning it. In the autumn, Ahiga came back. He arrived on a Thursday without announcement, looking lighter than when he had left. "I found Kala," he said, coming through the gate. "She's well. She says thank you," he said. "She says she always knew he was brave." Kimmy closed her eyes for just a moment, then opened them. "Come inside," she said. "There's coffee." He stayed a week. He left again and said he'd return in the spring. They believed him because Ahiga was a man who said precisely what he meant. 6 months after the night in the valley, the homestead looked different. The fence ran further now than it had before all of this began. New posts along the northern and southern lines both. The second room stood solid on the western wall with a good roof and a proper door. The garden by the creek had come in green twice now. Spring and fall, Matias had kept adding to the fence through autumn. He was not sure exactly why the adding continued. The original fence was sufficient. It had always been sufficient. But there was always one more section that could use another post, always one more stretch of ground that could stand to be defined more clearly. He decided that was acceptable. Some habits earn the right to continue even after the original reason for them changes. The nightmares still came sometimes, less often than before, different in quality when they did, less like punishment. More like a memory that has found its proper place in the order of things. He woke from them sometimes and lay in the dark, listening to the desert, and to the sound of Kimmy breathing beside him. And that was usually enough to carry him back to sleep. He had not found complete peace. He did not expect to. He had found something else instead, something partial and imperfect and genuinely his, something that would hold through winter and probably through the next one too. Some mornings he went to the fence before breakfast and drove 2 or 3 posts in alone. Not because they were urgently needed, just because the rhythm of it was good and the morning was good and the light was clear. And some mornings Kimmy brought coffee out to where he was working. And they stood together for a few minutes in the early quiet without any need for words, and the silence between them was the good kind of silence. The full kind, the earned kind. He thought sometimes about Takakota facing east on that flat rock. Watching the light arrive at the edge of the world the way he had always liked it, he thought about what the young man had chosen and what it had cost him. He thought about the stones Ahiga had placed on the grave, the song Kimi had sung. He thought about the things that remain after a person is gone, not in any formal or ceremonial way. Just thought about them. The way you think about things that have settled into the permanent part of your life. One morning in late November, Kimi called to him from the porch. "Matt," she said. "Supper's almost ready." He set the hammer down and walked toward her. She stood in the doorway with the evening light behind her. She watched him come up the path and she smiled. He came up the porch steps and she put her hand on his chest. She could feel his heartbeat through the shirt, steady and slow and regular, like a hammer striking cedar at first light, like a heartbeat that had decided to keep going and meant it this time. 4 bodies were found in that valley on a fall morning in 1878. 2 ranch hands came across them just after the sun cleared the eastern ridge. 4 men, the horses still tied to the scrub brush nearby. And nobody in the town of Carver's Bend asked who had put them there. That part is true. But some people knew, and in the years that followed, when the story traveled the way stories travel in country like this, quietly, over long distances, finding the people it was meant to find, it was not told as the story of a hero, not told as the story of a good man defeating a bad one, not told that way because the people who knew it best saw it differently. It was told as the story of a man who had been carrying something too long, and a woman who had been running from something too long, and the particular morning when both of those things stopped at the same time. It was told as the story of a young man who faced east at dawn, and of an older man who placed stones in silence, and of a song in a language most of the listeners did not understand, but felt. When people told it around a fire, they didn't end with the bodies in the valley. They didn't end with Dalton Voss. They ended with a question a woman asked on a cold morning walk home, and a 4-word answer a man gave her. Is that enough? Today it is, not a grand declaration of anything. Not a promise of completion or of permanent healing or of all debts settled. Just a man looking at what was in front of him and choosing to call it enough for today, and doing the same thing the next day, and the day after that, and finding, over time, that the days added up into something real. Matias Crowley never became a famous man. He never rode into a town and told his story to people who wanted to hear it. He drove fence posts and fixed roofs and carried water for a garden that came in green. He woke most mornings beside someone who had walked very far to find him, and he was glad she had. And the morning hammer sound was not the sound of hiding anymore. It was the sound of something being built. Something small and real and made from cedar and hard work and the willingness to begin again. Something that had cost more than it should have cost, and was worth it anyway. The desert kept its silence around all of this. The way the desert keeps everything it witnesses, without judgment, without advertisement, without asking for anything in return. Just the land, just the light, just the long and patient fact of things continuing. That is how the story ends. Not with trumpets or with the hero riding out on a fine horse, just with a man setting down his hammer at the end of a long and ordinary day, walking toward the porch where someone is waiting, his boots on the dry ground, the fence running long and straight behind him, the fence holding the way things hold when they are built by someone with a reason to build them. That is all. That is enough.